right, everyone, we're back to Romans Bible study and going over the things that seem to be standing out to me. I want to go ahead and look at verse 12, and I want to go over some things in verse 12 that I consider to be something, worthy of mention. So let's read Romans 4, verse 12. And the Father, speaking of Abraham, and the Father of circumcision, to them who are not of the circumcision only, but who also walk in the steps of that faith of our father Abraham, which he had being yet uncircumcised. So there's a couple of things about that verse that we need to be mindful of, because Paul is pointing it out for a specific purpose. And I've said this to people in the past, Paul says a lot with very few words. But what Paul's telling is, Abraham was called out by God. He was the father of the faith, but also through Isaac the promise came, and then you have Jacob, and then Jacob's name turned into Israel. So you have the whole nation of Israel. And sometimes where we get confused is who is Abraham the father of? And Abraham is the father of those of the circumcision, which are those people that follow the lineage of Abraham and also follow the law. But he is also the father of those who walk in the steps of that faith of our father Abraham. So there's really two categories there. There's the Jews, who are the physical descendants of Abraham. Actually, I guess technically you would say from Israel, or Jacob, whose name became Israel. But then you also have those people that walk in the steps of the faith of Abraham. So there's two different mentions there. He's the father of them both. Now, we had mentioned this before in the past, and I want to go back and go into it once more time. There's an instance in the book of Acts that was written, and it was a scene where the disciples were asked, do these guys who believe on Jesus Christ need to be circumcised? Let's go there and just look briefly at what the apostles said. And we're going to look in Acts 15, 28, and 29. And read what the apostles said. This is an example of when people came in and said, hey, do these new believers need to follow the law or be circumcised? And here's what the apostles said. For it seemed good to the Holy Ghost and to us, and remember, Luke actually wrote this, to lay upon you no greater burden than these necessary things. And here are the necessary things that are mentioned in the book of Acts. That ye abstain from meats offered to idols, and from blood, and from things strangled, and from fornication, from which if you keep yourself, ye shall do well. Fare you well. Now that is actually going back, it's actually answering the question that was asked in verse 24, and here's verse 24. Forasmuch as we have heard that certain which went out from among us have troubled you with words, subverting your souls, saying, you must be circumcised and keep the law, to whom we give no such commandment. And then their response and their answer was there what we read in verse 28 and 29. Now this also, and I'm not trying to say all the book of James, but I want to go to the book of James and let's talk about faith without works. James states in James 2:26, he says, for as the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without works is dead. And you can talk about this for a long time and maybe not describe it, or I can't necessarily describe it that good. But I just want to give the example. I have ran into people who say, well, I have faith in Jesus Christ. And James brings up the point, the demons in this world believe on Jesus Christ, but they don't have the works of that faith. So saying you have faith and actually having faith are two different things. James is saying if there's no works, then there is no faith, or your faith is dead. And then one more thing I want to cover, it's actually in Galatians, and Paul talks about, this in Acts they talked about there are certain who've gone out from among us saying that you must be circumcised and also keep the law. Well, Paul wrote a letter to the Galatians, and in that he wrote some things very similar, which goes hand in hand. And I'm just going to start in Galatians 3, verse 1, and just read here what Paul was saying. And he's saying it pretty strong. So let's look at what he said there, starting in verse 1. O foolish Galatians, who hath bewitched ye, that ye should not obey the truth, before whose eyes Jesus Christ had been evidently set forth, crucified among you? This only would I learn of ye. Receive ye the Spirit by the works of the law, or by the hearing of faith? Are ye so foolish? Having begun in the Spirit, are ye now made perfect by the flesh? Have ye suffered so many things in vain, if it be yet in vain? He therefore that ministereth to you the Spirit, and worketh miracles among you, doeth he it by the works of the law, or by the hearing of faith? Even as Abraham believed God, and it was counted to him for righteousness. Know ye therefore that ye which are of faith, the same are the children of Abraham. So just reinforcing the point Paul made there in Romans chapter 4 and verse 12. And this is going to be very important, because as we begin to live our life, go out and do things, you're going to run into people that want to constrain you. These people have been taught that if you go and you, in essence, what they've been taught is spiritual adultery. If you have your eyes on Christ and you're living and walking in the Spirit, what they say is, now look at the law. And when you look at the law, you've actually taken your eyes off Christ. But they're saying, look at the law and do those things in the law. And I'm telling you, the Spirit has set us free from that bondage. And Paul, this is a developing story all through the book of Romans. So we'll definitely revisit this again. So that's it for today, and moving on for the next time. Thank you.